7 massive hardshell suitcases, a K-9 unit alerting on the tarmac, and $12 million in cold, hard cash. She didn't wire the money, she physically took it. The dog stopped, it didn't bark, it didn't attack, it sat. At 11:42 p.m., a blacked-out SUV pulled into the cargo loading zone at the private terminal of Los Angeles International Airport, not the passenger entrance, the cargo zone. This detail alone raised immediate questions among those who would later review the security footage. What many people don't know is that private terminals exist specifically for discretion. Celebrities, executives, and high-profile travelers use them to avoid the chaos of commercial travel. But even these exclusive facilities have cameras. Every movement is recorded. Every arrival is documented. The driver stepped out first. He walked to the back of the vehicle and opened it. Then came the luggage. 7 identical matte black oversized suitcases emerged from that SUV. These were not standard travel bags. According to those who analyzed the footage, these were industrial-grade transport cases, the kind used for moving heavy equipment, or something else entirely. The weight became the first visible clue. Observers noted the driver's physical struggle as he lifted each case onto the trolley. His back strained, his movements slowed with each bag. A suitcase full of clothing typically weighs around 50 pounds. These appeared to weigh double that amount, perhaps more. When the third case landed on the trolley, it didn't bounce. It produced a heavy, dead thud that seemed to echo across the tarmac. That sound suggested density. That sound suggested something packed tight inside. The circumstances leading up to this moment are important to understand. Reports had already surfaced about significant financial discrepancies within the Sussex accounts. Prince Harry had reportedly discovered that $12 million was missing from their shared finances. The timing of this late-night departure raised serious questions. At the 11:48 p.m. mark, the footage captured what would become the most analyzed 6 seconds of the entire recording. A routine security sweep was underway nearby. A K-9 handler walked a German Shepherd along the line of cargo. This was standard procedure at major international hubs. These dogs are trained to detect various substances. Some are trained specifically for currency detection. They can identify the chemical compounds in paper money. As the handler passed the third suitcase on the trolley, the dog's behavior changed completely. The animal stopped walking. It lowered itself into a sitting position. In K-9 training protocols, this posture is known as a passive alert. It signals to the handler that the dog has detected something significant. The dog remained fixed on those 7 black cases. It would not move despite the handler's attempts to continue the sweep. Then a man in a suit stepped into the frame. He appeared to be part of a private security detail. He approached the handler and presented some form of documentation. A tense exchange followed. Words were spoken that the cameras could not capture clearly. The handler examined the document. He looked back at the dog, and then he physically pulled the animal away from the luggage. What was on that document? This question would later become central to the investigation. Sources close to the situation reveal that the figure watching this entire scene unfold from near the cargo bay was Meghan Markle herself. She wasn't waiting comfortably in the VIP lounge. She was standing at the loading area, watching every single bag being loaded onto the aircraft. Her body language, according to those who reviewed the footage, appeared hypervigilant. She reportedly kept looking over her shoulder toward the entrance gates. She was monitoring everything. This detail matters because it contradicts any suggestion of a routine departure. You don't stand in a cargo bay at midnight watching your luggage like a hawk unless those bags contain something critically important to you. If these were simply clothing and personal effects, the typical behavior would be to wait inside, to let staff handle the loading. The fact that she personally supervised every moment of this process suggests something else entirely. Behind closed doors, financial investigators had already begun tracing the movement of funds from Sussex accounts. The trail led to a series of payments made to obscure consulting firms over the previous 18 months. The amounts were significant. The services rendered were vague. The private jet waiting on the tarmac was registered to a holding company based in Malta. Its destination was Dubai, a city known for many things, including banking systems that operate with significant privacy protections. The pilot completed his pre-flight checks. The luggage was secured. The passengers boarded. At 12:01 a.m., the aircraft lifted off from Los Angeles and disappeared into the darkness. Over the Pacific Ocean. He literally invited the fox into the hen house, poured her tea, and handed her the keys to the safe. Within minutes of that departure, Harry's phone received a message that would haunt him. The full contents of that communication would only emerge later, but those who saw his reaction described it as devastating. The woman standing in the shadows near the SUV held what appeared to be a clipboard or manifest. She moved with the confidence of someone who had done this before. She handed documents to the pilot before he boarded. She exchanged a brief nod with Meghan before disappearing from the frame. Facial recognition analysis would later identify this woman as a forensic accountant specializing in asset protection. Her office was registered in the Cayman Islands. Her client list was confidential. Her expertise was in making money difficult to trace. What became clear later was deeply unsettling. This woman had been a regular visitor to the Montecito residence. She had been introduced to Harry as a wealth management consultant. Her stated purpose was to help streamline their philanthropic operations. Harry, trusting as always, had signed the documents she placed before him. He believed she was there to help the foundation grow. In reality, she was there to hollow it out. The betrayal was intimate. This wasn't a robbery conducted by strangers. This was an extraction performed by someone who had been welcomed into the household, someone who had been trusted with access to financial records and account information. On this particular occasion, investigators would discover that the preparation had been underway for months. The paper trail revealed a pattern. Over the previous 18 months, the Sussex production company had issued substantial payments to various firms, security consultants, digital media agencies, logistics providers. The invoices appeared legitimate at first glance. Deeper examination revealed something troubling. Several of these firms shared a registered address. That address matched the office building in the Cayman Islands where the forensic accountant operated. The companies existed on paper. Their actual operations were minimal to non-existent. The money flowed out as business expenses. It was then withdrawn in cash through a network of intermediaries, and brick by brick, those 7 suitcases were filled. Theatrical costumes and props, value $5,000 USD. This was the description entered on the cargo manifest filed minutes before takeoff. The declared weight for these supposed costumes was 600 pounds. Anyone with basic knowledge of luggage weights would recognize this as impossible for vintage dresses and stage props. The discrepancy was obvious, yet the manifest was approved. The situation escalated faster than expected once investigators began examining the Netflix production budget. Significant funds had been allocated for projects that never materialized, location scouting expenses for documentaries that were never filmed, script consulting fees for treatments that were never written. The numbers matched almost exactly. The missing $12 million corresponded to the phantom expenses charged to the production accounts. The money hadn't vanished into thin air. It had been systematically converted to cash and prepared for transport. Every time Harry traveled to London for his legal proceedings, every time he was away from the residence for more than a few days, another withdrawal was processed. Another brick was added to the stockpile. The explanation offered raised more questions than answers. When confronted with initial discrepancies, financial staff had reportedly been told that the expenses were necessary for strategic investments in future content. The vague language discouraged further inquiry. The authority behind the statements prevented pushback. Netflix legal teams would later begin examining their own exposure. The streaming giant had provided substantial funding based on deliverables that were never produced. If those funds had been deliberately diverted, the company faced significant losses. The forensic accountant, the woman with the clipboard, held the keys to understanding everything. She knew the shell company structures. She knew the withdrawal schedules. She knew exactly where every dollar had traveled before landing in those industrial-grade suitcases. At that point in time, the situation was already fragile. Harry had trusted the people around him. He had signed papers without demanding detailed explanations. He had assumed that everyone working within his household shared his interests. This assumption proved catastrophically wrong. The text message that arrived moments after takeoff contained only a photograph and 4 words. The image showed the receding lights of Lowe's Angels through an aircraft window. The caption read simply, "The debt is paid." The debt is paid. Legal analysts would later dissect this phrase endlessly. Was it an Admission that the $12 million was taken deliberately. Was it a claim that these funds were somehow owed? Was it an attempt to preemptively establish a legal defense? The message suggested that Meghan believed she was entitled to this money, that she viewed it as compensation for something, that she had decided unilaterally what her years with the royal family were worth. The 7 suitcase visual is going to become the icon of this scandal. The plane continued east over the Atlantic. Its destination was Dubai, but events were already in motion that would alter its course dramatically. The flight path showed steady progress toward the Middle East. The aircraft crossed the Atlantic, entered European airspace, and continued on its planned route. Everything appeared to proceed normally for the first several hours. Then Italian air traffic control made contact. The pilot received a communication that changed everything. Acting on a request from American authorities, Italian officials informed him that his flight plan had been flagged for immediate review. Continuing to the UAE would result in serious consequences. His pilot's license could be permanently revoked. The aircraft itself could be impounded. He was presented with 2 options: continue to Dubai and face the professional and legal fallout, or divert immediately to the nearest NATO-aligned airfield for an inspection. From this moment onward, nothing followed the usual script. The flight tracker showed the aircraft making a sharp bank to the north. The plane descended rapidly. Its new destination was not a luxury resort or a private terminal designed for wealthy travelers. The plane touched down at Sigonella Naval Air Station in Sicily. This is a military installation used by both American and NATO forces. American jurisdiction extended across that tarmac. The silence that followed only deepened suspicions among those monitoring the situation. For 20 minutes after the engines cut, nobody exited the aircraft. The doors remained closed. Inside that cabin, the reality of the situation must have become overwhelming. The Cayman Islands strategies, the diplomatic documentation, none of it would function on a military runway surrounded by federal agents. When the door finally opened, Meghan Markle emerged onto the stairs. She was not in handcuffs, but she was immediately flanked by officials who escorted her to a waiting vehicle. The 7 suitcases, the industrial-grade transport cases that had been so carefully loaded in Los Angeles, were removed by military personnel. Each bag was tagged as evidence. Each bag was transported to a secure hangar for examination. The dogs wouldn't need to alert this time. The cargo manifest declaring theatrical costumes was already in the hands of investigators. That document, with its impossible weight listing and its absurd valuation, would serve as its own form of confession. What followed was not publicly acknowledged at the time. In London, palace officials had been monitoring developments throughout the night. The combination of the airport footage, the financial discrepancies, and now the forced landing created a crisis requiring immediate response. The royal website was updated. Pages dedicated to the Duke and Duchess of Sussex were removed entirely. A brief statement from the Lord Chamberlain's office appeared in their place. It referenced conduct incompatible with the responsibilities of the Crown and violations of international diplomatic protocols. Those final words carried enormous weight. The palace was acknowledging that diplomatic status had been misused. By making this public statement, the royal family was stripping away any potential immunity claims. There would be no shield. There would be no intervention on her behalf. Sources close to the situation quietly reveal that Harry's reaction to these developments was complicated. He was seen walking alone near the beach in Montecito. No security accompanied him. For the first time in years, he moved without the protective bubble that had surrounded him since childhood. The money was gone, seized as evidence. The marriage was functionally ended. The woman he had defended against his own family stood accused of crimes that could result in years of imprisonment. But witnesses described something unexpected in his demeanor. He didn't appear crushed, he appeared relieved. The financial terror that had consumed his life for months was over. The manipulation he had experienced was now visible to everyone. He was no longer defending someone against accusations he secretly suspected were true. Even now, there is no official clarity on what conversations occurred in the hours following the Sicily landing. The forensic accountant reportedly began cooperating with investigators almost immediately. Her lawyers contacted federal officials before she had even exited the aircraft. Full cooperation was offered in exchange for leniency. She would provide everything. He shell company structures, the fake invoices, the withdrawal schedules, the complete architecture of the scheme that had been built over 18 months. Meghan is going to be left standing alone in the center of the circle while everyone points the finger at her. The manifest lie became the simplest charge to prove, declaring $12 million in currency as $5,000 worth of costumes constituted a clear violation of federal law. No interpretation was required. No complex financial tracing was necessary. She had signed a document. The document was false. The consequences were automatic. The legal situation that emerged in the following days was more severe than initial reports suggested. Multiple potential charges were being examined by federal prosecutors. Bulk cash smuggling, making false statements on customs documents, wire fraud related to the production funds, potential misuse of diplomatic credentials. Each charge carried its own penalties. Combined, they represented decades of potential imprisonment. The 7 suitcases sat in an evidence locker at a federal facility. Their contents had been cataloged, photographed, and counted. The total matched the amount Harry had reported missing. The physical evidence confirmed what the financial records suggested. Only later did the true impact become apparent to those following the case. This wasn't simply a marital dispute over assets. This was a sophisticated financial operation that had been planned and executed over many months. It involved shell companies across multiple jurisdictions. It required the cooperation of financial professionals willing to bend or break rules. The forensic accountant's cooperation proved devastating for the defense. She provided investigators with detailed records of every transaction. She explained how the shell companies functioned. She identified the intermediaries who had withdrawn cash and delivered it to storage locations. She documented the timeline of the operation from its earliest planning stages. Every invoice that had been submitted to the production company was cross-referenced with actual services rendered. In case after case, the services were fictional. The companies existed only as vehicles for moving money. Accounts from journalists and insiders reveal a consistent pattern in the public response. The sympathy that had once existed for Meghan, the understanding of the pressures she faced, evaporated rapidly. The details of the scheme were too deliberate. The scale was too large. The planning was too extensive. This was not someone acting impulsively under stress. This was someone who had spent 18 months preparing an exit strategy that included stripping her husband of his inheritance. Harry's legal team released a carefully worded statement. It expressed his cooperation with investigators. It confirmed his status as a victim of financial fraud. It made clear that he had no knowledge of the scheme until the funds were already missing. The statement also confirmed something else. The marriage was over. Divorce proceedings would commence immediately. All shared assets would be frozen pending investigation. The public records later confirmed part of this timeline through court filings. Observers noted a sharp shift in strategy from Meghan's representatives. Initial statements had suggested the situation was a misunderstanding, that the cash was legitimately acquired personal funds, that the manifest description was simply an administrative error. These positions became impossible to maintain as evidence accumulated. The cooperating witnesses, the documentary proof, the forensic accounting records, the testimony of staff members who had observed the preparation, each element reinforced the others. The full implications may only now be emerging. The case raised questions about oversight of high-profile individuals, about the ease with which diplomatic status could be exploited, about the vulnerability of private aviation to financial crimes, about the systems that should have flagged these transactions but failed. Multiple reforms were proposed in the weeks following the arrest: enhanced screening for private terminal departures, stronger verification of diplomatic credentials, automatic flags for cargo manifests with weight-value discrepancies. But this was far from the end of the story. Netflix initiated its own legal proceedings to recover the embezzled production funds. The streaming company faced difficult questions about its due diligence, about how such significant amounts could be diverted without detection, about what internal controls had failed. The insurance implications were substantial. Production companies worldwide reviewed their own oversight procedures. The Sussex case became a cautionary tale in entertainment industry boardrooms. And in Montecito, Harry began the slow process of rebuilding. The beach walks continued, the security detail gradually returned. Interviews were scheduled with investigators. Depositions were prepared. The man who had once been fifth in line to the British throne was now the star witness in a federal fraud case. Some who observed him during this period described a transformation. The tension that had marked his public appearances for years seemed diminished. The defensive posture was gone. He spoke more freely to staff. He laughed more easily. The debris of his marriage was scattered across courtrooms in multiple countries. The fortune he had inherited was being recovered piece by piece through legal proceedings. The woman he had chosen over his family was facing the consequences of choices made long before he understood them. The arraignment hearings were scheduled. The evidence would be presented. The contents of those 7 suitcases would be displayed for juries to examine. What happens next could redefine everything about how this story is ultimately understood. Was this the calculated operation of a sophisticated criminal? Was it the desperate act of someone who felt trapped and undervalued? Was it simply greed overwhelming judgment? These questions would be debated in courtrooms. They would be analyzed by commentators. They would be discussed by ordinary people trying to understand how a fairy tale could end with 7 black suitcases on a tarmac at midnight. The defining image remained those heavy bags, the straining driver, the alerting dog, the woman watching from the shadows. Some stories end with answers. This one ends with consequences still unfolding.